Hi everybody, Lori here for Simon Says Stamp. Thank you so much for joining me today. I've got a fun project to share with you featuring the Pattern Squares stencil that just came out in the latest Out of This World release with Simon Says Stamp. And I'm going to use every single square in this stencil. That's right. We're going to use it and we're going to blend it. Okay, so first I'm going to do a bunch with this solid open square, and I am using some tape just around the edges just to mask off any areas that I don't want the color. So I'm starting with Cheeky, and I'm going to be using all positively saturated inks. I'll have everything that I'm using, the colors, the stencils, the dyes, everything listed in the description box if you're watching on YouTube. If I don't mention the color and all that. Now I do take a little stamp chamois and kind of clean this off, just a quick wipe. We're moving on to orange. So we started with the reds, now we're moving on to orange, and this is Melon. So I'm going to be using the lightest shade in most of the color families. You know how the positively saturated inks come in little families of 3, like a light, medium, and dark. So most of the time when I blend the square, I'm going to be using the lightest shade, and then when I go over top to add the detail, I'll add either the mid-tone or the darker shade. So here we have Lemonade. And I'm also using the Simon Says Stamp blender brushes, which I love. They are slightly larger, so it makes it really easy to cover this square size so effortlessly. Here we have Celery, one of my favorite greens, my go-tos. These are kind of my go-to colors. And I do have people ask me often, they're always like, Laura, what color should I buy? And it's so easy for me to just respond. I'm like, Celery. Lemonade, Melon, Cheeky. I just know, boom, 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 because these are the colors I grab time and time again. Okay, so we did a little Tide Pool, and now we're on to Marine, and that is the lightest shade in the blue. And then we're going to do a purple, which is Lilac, and then we'll finish it off with a little pink in Carnation. Okay, so I didn't do any gradient love. I'm not doing anything fancy. This is just a flat, smooth wash of color using that open square from the Pattern Square stencil. Okay, so here we have Carnation, just a light wash of pink. I'm trying not to get the ink where I don't want it to go. Sometimes I get a little aggressive with the blending and then it goes off. You can see there's a little blurb of purple that wasn't. Whatever, we're moving on. It's all good. Okay, now I'm starting to lay the pattern square over top of that solid square. And here's where I come in with the darker shade of ink. So since this light shade was Carnation, the next color is Peony, which is one of my most favorite colors of all the positively saturated inks. Peony is where it's at. Okay, and that gives you those stripes. And then next we have the Orchid, which is a darker shade after Lilac. And this is going to be like a little polka dot detail on here. You don't need much. Little dab will do ya. And then you got the Orchid on the Lilac for a polka dotted purple square. And that's almost a tongue twister. A polka dotted purple square. Okay, next we have Cadet. I'll tell you what, these blues are juicy. And they'll punch you in the face. So you got to watch out. Now this would probably be a good time if I wanted to pull out the small blender brushes to get in those little nooks and crannies of these detail. But I just went ahead and used the brushes that I had out. Okay, now we're blending over top of the Tide Pool, and I pulled out Tropic. Next shade darker. Now here's a little loopy-doopy detail stenciled square design. It's got a little loopy-doopy to it. And got to be careful when some of these are, you don't want to bend them is what I'm saying. So you don't want to blend too aggressively. Okay, now we're moving on to the Celery, and this one's going to be a checkered. So I pulled out LIMELICIOUS, and that's going to blend that checkered pattern onto that Celery solid square. Now my squares are very wonky on this panel. I didn't try to make them straight or parallel because I'm going to pull out square dies and die cut all these squares and pop them up on a card base. Okay, moving on to this Lemonade square, I chose the diagonal. Well, let me tell you about the diagonal. I feel like it's the most fragile one out of the bunch. And so you really, I learned this the hard way. You probably don't want to go in circular motion. You want to just go in like stripey motion, like in the direction of the diagonal, because those ones will move. Now here we have a little, what do you call this, like a zigzag or like a chevron? It's kind of a ziggy-zag chevron. And then finally we've got the blush doing the, well, I guess this is a chevron, right? The other one was a zigzag, and here we have the chevron. So now I'm trying to go in the direction of the stencil rather than try to do circular motion. I feel like I was kind of moving those intricate little, you got to be delicate with it. You got to have a light touch. You got to be sensitive. You got to read the room. You know what I mean? It's much like raising teenage girls. You got to read the room. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and try to do a yellow one over one more time, see if I could get it a little bit better. Try to go the direction of the diagonal. I told my husband the other day, because, you know, it is not easy raising these daughters when they get into the teenage years. And I said, listen, it's like walking the dog, Mark. You can walk with the dog or you can walk against the dog. That's what it's like raising teenage girls. I'll tell you more about that in a second, but I pulled out the 5 squares die set, and it's basically 5 squares. I think you can also buy a single square if you just want to buy one, and it fits perfectly with the size of squares in this pattern square stencil. So it's nice when you got the 5, you can die cut all 5 at once. And then I'm just gonna, you know, repeat this. But back to walking the dog or walking against the dog. Our dog Hank sometimes pulls, and I have found if you just walk with him, it's easier. By the way, I did another square out of heather and violet because I needed another color to round out this 3 rows of 3. Okay, so that worked good there, popping that in. And now what I'm going to do is just, I cut a square card base, 5.5 by 5.5 out of white cardstock, and I'm getting the lay of the land here. Going to do 3 rows of 3, keeping it symmetrical, keeping it clean, mean, and just hip to be square. Okay, I'm going to pop these up with some 3D foam squares. Back to walking the dog. So when Hank pulls, you can go with it, or you can be like tugging at him the whole time, trying to, like, it's the who's in power, who's in control. And I have found it's much easier walk if you just walk with him rather than try to like run the show, because he wants to run the show. And listen, obviously I'm not a certified dog trainer because my dog's running the show. But I said to Mark, my husband, it's a lot like that when you're talking to the girls. Don't always play devil's advocate. Just listen and then just kind of go with it. Just like read the room. If they're mad about something, you get mad about it with them. Don't like give the opposite opinion. Just be like, yeah, I hear what you're saying. You know? Okay, listen, I don't know what I'm talking about, but this is just what's going on. Now for a sentiment, pull out an oldie but a goodie. This is the Swoopy Thank You by Kathy Zilski. And I did the shadow out of vellum, the word die out of matte gold. I'm just doing one layer, keeping it simple. A lot of times I do stack it up. I'll cut like, die cut 3 more of the thank you and stack it up to give it dimension. But you don't always have to. Today I'm just gluing one flat down onto the vellum. I love these Simon Says Stamp tweezers. They're so handy dandy when you're holding the word die cut, so you can put the glue on and flip it over and just line that up easily onto the vellum. Let that dry. I flipped it over. I did add a few slivers of foam tape just to pop it up, you know, because dimension is life. And then for embellishment, a few little, I think these are called dewdrops. I love these ones by Concord 9th. They've got the cute little container, and they give you that little bit of shimmer, but not any added color. And there you have a 5.5 by 5.5 square full of 9 pattern squares and a matte gold thank you. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for joining me today. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.
Hi there, I'm Heidi, Simon's mama and founder at SimonsSaysStamp.com. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, be sure to press the thumbs up and subscribe to see more great content.